Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022, and I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by Crackle and Pop over here, Cody Roadcap, Tyler Snyder in the house. How you guys doing here going into week 5?
Doing good. Hopefully, I'm not as boring as that cereal that you just referenced us as, or the show won't be as boring.
Yeah, but you know what this show is? This show is the marshmallow that makes Rice Krispies so delicious. That's what this is. We are a big Rice Krispie treat. Um, Man, my jokes are getting as bad as George's now. This is bad. If you guys are listening to the podcast, maybe turn it off or just fast forward till we get to the actual football stuff. But these jokes are killing us. But no, I'm doing pretty good. Titans beat the Colts. Colts
Couch GM
suck.
sweep?
I just want to say, oh yeah, back to back Couch GM sweeps. F the Colts. Anybody out there that's a Colts fan, I'm sorry. It's a good week.
Yes, but I just at the least appreciate your positivity over Cody's. This is a boring cereal to yours. We are the marshmallow. I mean, I will let that joke go now. But covered in today's show, we're going to hit some NFL news and notes. We're going to do my favorite segment, Quotes of the Week. We're going to dive into the waiver wire. We're going to talk some more trades with some buy low, sell high. And we are going to preview the Thursday night football game for week 5. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com, our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at the Couch GMs, and join our Discord chat. The link is in the description of the video or podcast you are watching. All right, guys, let's jump into NFL news. Is my intro at the end now fast enough that I could be a car salesman, or am I not quite there yet?
Still needs work.
Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. But let's just jump in here to NFL news, where we have to start off talking about Tua again, because we did mention on our show on Thursday, we recorded Thursday, released Friday. He suffered a concussion in the Thursday night football game. He is out indefinitely, at least for week 5. And we are now completely unsure if he actually passed concussion protocol in week 3 properly or not. The NFL fired the independent neurologist that was working with the Dolphins during that protocol in week 3. There's word the NFL may be implementing a rule that states if a player demonstrates any form of instability after a hit, they'll be automatically ruled out for a game. This has turned into a lot more serious issue than it did when we last talked about this last week.
Yeah, I mean, concussions are serious. They need to be looked at. It's good for the NFL to take a, harder look into it. And we kind of saw another interesting thing on Sunday Night Football 2 days ago when Cameron Brate got hit. He laid on the ground for a little bit. He walked off to the sideline, but he didn't go into the blue tent. He came back for a few plays, and then he wasn't able to come back out for halftime because he was in concussion protocol. So you have to ask, why was he back out on the field in just a few plays? Why wasn't he further evaluated? But at the end of the day, all this is important, but I do just want to wish Tua a quick and fast recovery. That was a nasty hit, especially the way his fingers locked up and all that. So hopefully Tua recovers and the NFL gets better for it in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. It really makes things look even sketchier because not only was Tua able to come back into the game the first time, and we were kind of sketched out by that, but then they do an investigation into it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's fine. It was handled properly," and now they're looking into it yet again. It makes you wonder: was it done right the first time? But also, was the investigation into it done properly? So lots of moving pieces here. Could definitely be sketchy, but concussions aren't something to play with. I feel like when they first introduced the independent neurologist, you saw a lot of plays where they would stop the play and they'd be like, this player needs to come out for one play for evaluation. And you would see it, and people were getting pulled. If they showed any kind of signs of a concussion, the guy up in the booth was pulling them off. I feel like it's really rare to see that now. I feel like they've gotten away from it a little bit. Not sure why. Not sure if there's complaints about stopping the game or what was going on, but health is the most important thing. So hopefully we get back to it.
I do feel like I've heard that happen a few times, but I think maybe it's not as noticeable because they're doing it faster. I mean, it's possible. I still feel like there might have been a downtick and people pulled out of games, but I think they're doing it faster now to the point where we're not noticing as much, which if that's the case, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. But, I think everyone is, I don't want to say tired of it because it's a very serious topic, but we're all reaching our limit on the Tua and the concussion talk. We just have to wait and see what comes out of it. And again, hope that Tua has a full recovery. But, talking about changes and things happening quicker than we expected, the Steelers, after 3.5 weeks, are moving on from Mitch Trubisky and headed to rookie Kenny Pickett. If you had the over on 3.5 weeks, you lost. If you had the under, congrats, you won. I think I had that backwards. You guys can correct me if I was wrong. It is interesting to me, like Kenny Pickett didn't look that much better than Trubisky, in my opinion, when I watched the game. What were your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely didn't look that much better. I mean, he had the 2 rushing touchdowns, but he had the 3 interceptions. And like, you can kind of erase the interception, the third one that he threw, because it was a Hail Mary trying to win the game. But outside of that, like, I really don't think I don't think he looked that impressive where like he needs to be the starter. But I think it's more of a, once you make the decision to bench your starter, it's already going to be in his head. The fan base is already going to have some kind of mentality. They're going to be ready for that change. I feel like once you bench your starter mid-game, you kind of have to move forward with the backup, or especially if it's a rookie. Maybe that's just me, but again, Trubisky wasn't setting the world on fire this season. About a 60% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. It's not spectacular, but it's really not that bad. I mean, if he would have came out here and he would have thrown 6 interceptions and only 1 touchdown or something like that, then okay, I get it. Like, bench him, move on. But he was keeping the Steelers in games. Every game they lost was close. I mean, you lost by 12 to the Browns, but that's your biggest margin of defeat. It's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I think now it's a situation of you went from Trubisky, who, yeah, he's never going to be the most impressive quarterback, but he's going to take care of the ball for the most part to keep you in games, like you said. Pickett now, especially at this point in his development, where he was definitely among those quarterbacks, even though he was the first one drafted, that we thought they all needed time to sit there, learn systems, learn the speed of the NFL. He's getting thrown into the fire very early in that, learning process. He's going to be very boom or bust. He could show a lot of really good things in the next few weeks, but throw just as many interceptions as touchdowns. And really it could end up hurting his development if he hurts his own mentality of I don't know if I can do this now, which is why the turnover on quarterbacks in today's NFL is so much faster than it used to be in the past. What the Packers are doing with Jordan Love is what you're used to seeing in the past. And now all these guys are getting thrown in, and there's a lot of turnover at the quarterback position on guys that I think could benefit from sitting back and learning, but never get the opportunity.
I mean, obviously we're a fantasy football podcast, so the biggest thing we need to look at is fantasy impact. So Deontay Johnson was kind of really the only receiver we were willing to start before. Of course, you were starting Najee Harris if you have him, even though he's been kind of disappointing this year. Cody, is there any changes with any players on the Steelers up or down because of the quarterback change?
Yeah, I think there is. We're going to talk about one of those guys when we do our waiver wire segment. Especially this week, and that guy would be George Pickens. We saw him get a lot of targets, but I wonder how much of that is George Pickens kind of is like the number 1 wide receiver in the second team offense. So was the guy he was the most practiced to. Now that he's going to get those full starter reps, will we start to see the Deontay Johnson come back? And I think that's where we're going to be. I think Deontay Johnson is still going to be the guy we're going to be starting most weeks. But I think the big increase of anyone is going to be Pat Freiermuth. We're going to start to see what we saw last year with Ben Roethlisberger. Pat Freiermuth has been up and down. He hasn't been that big play guy, hasn't been the touchdown guy. I'm not saying Kenny Pickett's going to make this offense turn into a top 10 offense by any means, but I think Pat Freiermuth is going to be the biggest uptick with the quarterback change.
I'm with you, and I'll save more of the Pickens talk for later when we talk about waivers. But yeah, I really also hope that this brings up Freiermuth because the tight end position has been so rough. If there's nothing you have to add, Tyler, we can move on to some injury news from the week. So we'll start off in Denver, where sadly Javonte Williams' season is over as he tore his ACL and LCL in that game. And in fantasy, we now look at a starter who is Melvin Gordon, who has fumbled 5 times in his last, I think it was 42 or 44 carries.
44.
that is, either way, is absolutely insane and very concerning, even though you could have had, him on your bench and fell into a starting running back.
Yeah, I think Melvin Gordon's going to be fine. I think he's going to figure out the fumbling issues. I honestly think Melvin Gordon's had some pretty decent fumbling issues his entire career, but his skill has been able to kind of negate that and keep him on the field. I think he'll be fine. Personally, I would not be rushing to the waiver wire to pick up Mike Boone. I mean, as a safety net kind of thing, like sure, but Gordon's going to have to be the guy. He's got the most talent there. He's the pass catcher. He's the rusher. We've seen what he can do with Javonte Williams there. And now with Williams out, you need to be able to turn to somebody. But I would not be surprised to see the Broncos kind of try to look elsewhere. Maybe it's a running back on free agency. Maybe they trade for a backup running back somewhere else. But I would not be surprised to see the Broncos go and snag another running back.
Two names I've heard floating, actually, were Kareem Hunt and Alexander Madison.
See, I don't know if they're going to make that big of a move. What I was going to say, I agree with they might look elsewhere. But a guy that you probably won't ever talk about in fantasy, but like a guy like Patrick Taylor, he's on the Packers practice squad, and that's where he's worked with Nathaniel Hackett the last 2 years in Green Bay. So he kind of has idea. He's more of a power back. He'd be a complimentary. So that would be the kind of move that I think that the Broncos might make if they wanted to go elsewhere, or maybe they already were getting Mike Boone involved coming into before the injury the last 2 weeks. So maybe they're confident with Gordon and Boone and they'll just ride it out. But another running back did go down this week. Cordurelle Patterson, he was questionable coming into the week. He still played, and now he's ended up getting a knee procedure. Wow, I can't speak today. And he's headed to the IR. So they're hoping to get him back in those 4 weeks. But those are two other. There's another guy, Tyler Algier. He's probably at the top of the waiver wires for most people. Again, it's not a great waiver wire period, which we'll talk about. But instant reactions to the Cordurelle Patterson news.
I mean, it hurts. Patterson was one of the better running backs all of last year, or as George likes to say, one of the better receivers playing running back of all of last year. I mean, look, the guy was consistent. Last year, he broke out 1 week, and people didn't rush to the waiver wire to pick him up. And then he broke out a second week, and people still didn't pick him up on the waiver wire because they didn't believe in him. Then he broke out a third week, and we're like, all right, fine, we'll pick you up. And by week 6 or 7 of him doing it, we were all like, okay, he has to be in your lineup. And I can say from experience, like I tried trading Patterson in some leagues last year after his breakout, and everyone was like, I don't want Patterson. Like, he's not going to keep this up. But you know what? He did. He kept it up all year. And then coming into this year, preseason, I mean, Patterson was late in the draft. He was a late round snag, and you were like, I don't feel confident with it. And people were like, yeah, I'm not taking Patterson. He's definitely not going to do it. But look, all he did was come out and prove us wrong again, be a dominant fantasy asset, heavily used in the passing game and run game. He's been great. He's been a guy that it's gotten to the point where it's like you have to have him in your lineup. He's a top 10 running back this year. So it's a huge loss. It's an absolute huge loss. I mean, it's one of the guys that is able to fill in because we talk about all the top running backs this year struggling. And then there's some other running backs like David Montgomery that have gone down with injuries. So you've needed guys like Patterson to step in. So this one's not going to get a whole bunch of media attention, but I think this is one of the bigger fantasy injuries we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, I still really find it hard to be like, yeah, Cordurelle Patterson's going to come back and just jump right into that role again. Yeah, he has been effective, but when is he going to stop? Because, like, he sputtered down the stretch. I loved Cordurelle Patterson last year. I was one of the few people that was jumping on that bandwagon, like you finally did there, too. But I just didn't see it being repeated this year. I'm wrong, but I'm still going to stick to my guns that, like, I'm worried even when he comes back. But there's no denying that if you drafted this guy late, you had a steal. You had a guy who was reliable for you for 3.5 weeks, and it's unfortunate he's out now for at least 4.
For sure. And we got 2 more injuries that we'll hit real quick before we get into our next segment. Brian Hoyer was already backing up Mac Jones. He left the game with a concussion, so 3rd-string, 4th-round pick Bailey Zappi, which is Zappi. It's a great last name. He came in. He played well in a competitive matchup against the Packers. And then other rookie Treyland Burke is dealing with turf toe, which is the injury that always sounds like, what do you mean you have turf toe? That doesn't sound like, but that's like an actual tear in your toe ligament. So it's very serious, very painful. And he'll miss a few weeks. Tyler might be able to correct me, but I don't think they placed him on IR yet because they're still trying to figure that one out.
No, I mean, there's a chance that he's back after only missing 2 games. And if he's able to come back at that point, then there's no point putting him on IR. From what I've heard so far, the reason they'd consider IR is to give him extra rest, extra time to make sure he's good and heal up. It looks like there is talks that he'd be able to return before what the IR would put him at. So they're not sure what they're going to do right there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Josh Gordon called up off the practice squad and signed to the active roster. He has been called up on game days a few times. But guys, just for a quick second, I mean, Treyland Burks, fantasy-wise, not huge. He was really starting to break out in the first 2 weeks, showing some big flashes, and then kind of stopped being used right after Tannehill made a comment saying, I feel like Burks is on the verge of a breakout and like a huge game, and then they basically just stopped using him. But one quick second, man, I want to talk about the way this injury was handled. And, I'm a big Titans fan, obviously, so I hate bashing my own team, but we talked about injuries earlier not being handled properly with concussions, but just because it's not a concussion, any injury is still a serious injury if it's causing you to limp excessively, or if you notice a person is injured, why would you keep him in? Treyland Burks hurt his foot and goes down, can barely stand up, and instead of stopping the play, replacing him, taking an injury timeout, it wasn't even within 2 minutes, so they didn't have to waste the timeout. They decided to keep him on the field for one more play, which was a crucial 3rd and 5 play, and he ended up hopping on one foot the whole play, trying to get himself open still. Like, why wouldn't you just replace the guy? I don't know. Questionable handling of the injury there.
Yeah, I mean, I did see the play, and it did look like Burks hobbled back to the huddle. Like, he didn't try to pull himself out, or anything like that. So obviously there's people in the sky that might need to shut that down, but he got up, he hobbled to the huddle. So I think that was just him trying to push through it, and then he quickly realized he couldn't. So you would hope that next time, if he's in that much pain, he would continue to stay down and not make you play 10 on 11 on a big 3rd down.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we've seen stuff like that before where people try to stay in because they feel like they're healthy enough to keep going and the coaches want to take a look at them, so they pull them out. Or, I mean, how often do you see a quarterback just purposely stay on the field on a 4th down because he's deciding they're going for it and the coach is like, no, get off the field. Like, the coach still has a chance to override that, and the coach should have overrided that. And I just hope that, outside of the Titans, I hope that a lot of teams kind of look at these and you see a player limping that bad or really hurt and they try to keep themselves in the game, like, unless it's like a massive play in a really, really key game, like, take the guy out. Make sure he's okay. You don't want to lose him long term because he pushes it and aggravates it.
The only reason I'll say, like, yeah, I could see, like, the situation where, like, the player didn't try to stay on the coach. I do remember a time from, I think it was the week 2 Thursday night football game with the Chiefs and the Chargers, where there was a goal line play inside the 2-minute warning. Gerald Everett tried to go off the field. The coaches waved him to stay back on. And that was the play that Justin Herbert threw the pick 6 to the Chiefs because he tried to target Everett, who obviously was not in a position to be on the field at that point. So I'm with you. I've seen it once or twice. And I think especially after this concussion thing, we might have to see if something changes in that format.
Well, I think we need to make a clear distinction that the Gerald Everett was tired. He was not
Fair.
injured. So it wasn't like they were trying to push him through an injury or anything like that. Not saying it wasn't the right call. Like, they outsmarted themselves trying to go fast. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. And I do, and in his case, he at least tried to wave himself out. Where, back to, we're still talking about Treyland Burks. He got up and he went to the huddle. Like, he might have hobbled there, but we see players, get up, limp, and shake it off, and they're fine too. So obviously, when you see the aftermath where he has to hop on one leg to run around, you're like, why is he even in there? But there has to be some player accountability too, just like with concussions. Like, they have to also be, your head kind of hurts, you need to report it. It's a lot. We all have that competitive nature, and they have it 10 times more than any of us do sitting on the couch being GMs of our fantasy team. but like it's hard to pull yourself out or hard not to be out there with your guys you work so hard for. So hopefully we just start to see a little bit more player safety emphasis from both the NFL, the coaches, and the players.
Agreed. And I know we could probably talk about this the rest of the night, so I think we have to move on to our next segment, and that's Quotes of the Week. Quotes of the Week actually starts off in that Titans-Colts game, where post-game Nyheim Hines, the now potentially starting running back for the Colts this week, was talking about their slow start and their loss, and he said, "Not an excuse, but every year we have a new quarterback, so each year we have growing pains while sitting here and watching Tennessee, which has had Tannehill, my whole career, and each year we're restarting, and we have to turn the page." So we'll just rewind this back really fast to the offseason where we said the Colts don't want to put a Band-Aid on the quarterback position, and then they go out there and trade for yet another veteran quarterback who's only going to be there for a year or two. And now we look at players who are actually upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know I always bring things back to the Titans, but it reminds me of the Titans when they had Marcus Mariota, and all 4 of his first 4 years on the Titans, they had a new offensive coordinator. Like, he just never seemed to get set. He just never seemed to get comfortable because they're changing it all the time. And, they say the quarterback is one of the biggest pieces on the football team. He is the leader. He is, the general on the field. And you change out that quarterback every year, even if you're running the same plays and the same scheme, you still have a different guy throwing the ball. That's a whole new chemistry you have to build. That's a whole new play style you have to learn around. And, continuing to Band-Aid the position, it's just not going to do it. And I heard plenty of people saying the Colts are going to win the division. The Colts might even win the Super Bowl because they have Matt Ryan. Like, can we finally say that maybe Matt Ryan's not that spectacular anymore at this point in his career? Like, have we seen enough yet?
I mean, you're going to get irritated. I'm not going to rule out, because we've seen the Colts do this before with all the band quarterbacks. Quarterbacks come in. Phillip Rivers did it. Carson Wentz did it. Heck, Jacoby Brissett did it. Like, they start out 1-4, and then they're right there in the playoffs. Maybe this will finally be the year. Matt Ryan just can't pull it together. I mean, they lost by 7 to the Titans. They got shut out by the Jags, and they tied the Texans. That is 3 awful performances, but they also beat the Chiefs. So it is such a hard team to gauge any given Sunday. Matt Ryan, hey, he's not going to be putting up a bunch of points, but if they can, get healthy, get Jonathan Taylor back, get their offensive line healthy, get these receivers healthy, because they were already limited at the receiver position, they might actually do something. Or maybe he just will help them be in a position to draft a quarterback, because we have to look back to last year, the offseason too. Like, it was Matt Ryan, Trubisky, who just got benched, Carson Wentz, who they traded. Like, those are the quarterbacks on the move. So it wasn't like a huge upgrade either way. We all thought they should have just rode with Carson Wentz for another year. They didn't. And they went this route. So we'll have to see if it works out in the end. But the early signs, to Tyler's point, are definitely like, okay, Matt Ryan might be done. So we're going to talk about DK Metcalf, who was carted to the locker room, and people got concerned. What is this about? No word. And he had to take a poop. And he put on Twitter after it the video of him. He's like, that clinch walk wouldn't have made it. And all I got to say is DK Metcalf. We've all been there. And if you're saying you haven't been there, you're lying.
Amen. That was the most relatable quote of the week, and honestly, absolutely hilarious. But no, his name is also Decaf, so you did not make a mistake there. But it's so relatable.
For sure. Another one that kind of came off of Twitter, and our last 2 quotes are about the Kansas City Chiefs Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. We'll start with the Twitter one, because if you haven't seen by now, do you even pay attention to anything sports? Because I feel like the Patrick Mahomes little shovel pass to Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been played all over SportsCenter, NFL Network, ESPN, Twitter, TikTok, all of them since it happened. And if you didn't also see, Brady was a little shaken up after one of the sacks. So he took to Twitter after the game and said, time for a little recovery on this shoulder and a few hours of film to figure out how Pat flicked that TD pass. George, why don't you
go ahead?
Go ahead. I was going to say, why don't you tie it into what Travis Kelce had to say, and then we can just talk about Patrick Mahomes in general.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my jaw just dropped open. Like, how the heck did CEH get that ball? I thought he was like on the ground already, and the ball was in his hands. Travis Kelce must have also thought the same thing, because in his post game press conference, he said, "quote The NFL hasn't seen anything like Mahomes. I promise you that. You saw it today. He's the Houdini of our era." And that was my thoughts exactly when I was watching that play in the moment. So Travis Kelce is just a fan like the rest of us as he's watching Mahomes do some magic on the field.
Yeah, that was definitely an impressive play. Patrick Mahomes has been impressive since he got the starting job, and he continues every year to have a throw or two that goes, how did he do that? I mean, he's not the inventor of the no-look pass. We've seen other guys do it 10 years before he did, but the media thinks it was him. You know, he threw the ball left-handed on a Thursday or Sunday night game against the Broncos on a critical third down. He made that play. He just goes out there and make plays. And obviously, everyone knows I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and I've always said that Aaron Rodgers is the most talented passer I've ever personally seen. Now, granted, I'm only in my mid-20s, so there was a lot of great throwers of the football that I didn't get the privilege to see. And I think Patrick Mahomes is closely encroaching him. If you go back and look, Rodgers has a lot of great plays, but Patrick Mahomes almost gives me the vibe of, and I hate doing player comparisons, so the fact that I'm doing this is kind of funny. He gives me Aaron Rodgers combined with Brett Favre, except somehow nobody catches his interceptions. He has like the most dropped interceptions in league history.
Yeah.
So it doesn't show up in the stat book, but like he has that like unique arm angle, the arm talent, but he has that like gunslinger run around throw around that Brett Favre had too. So he's almost like both Packers quarterbacks combined in a way.
So the joke I was going to make was like, oh, he knows when there's going to be about an interception on a play, so he throws a little like bit of a knuckle on that ball, so it's harder to catch. But in reality, maybe it's just the fact that he can zip it in there so fast that a defensive back who's not expecting to be in position for a pick makes it so much harder to catch, as opposed to his receiver who's expecting it can get that ball. Maybe that's something about what it is, but his arm talent is really, honestly, I would say, exceeds Aaron Rodgers, especially at this point in his career. Aaron Rodgers in his prime was elite, and like, you know, recency bias can get in that. But it's just like the idea of like he can throw from the multiple platforms, he can throw it left-handed, the no look thing. Like Rodgers could get a ball in any window that you could see, but it just looks more impressive when you have a guy who can do it off all these platforms, sidearm, as opposed to Rodgers, who was always super technically sound.
See, I'm gonna have to send you some videos.
Okay.
Because he is the again, I don't want to say inventor, because I mean, heck, Steve Young did it, John Elway did it. They all threw from different platforms. But I'm gonna have to send you like a thread of video of touchdowns that didn't count because of penalties or something like that. They were just mind-blowing throws. One even happened in Kansas City 3 years ago when he hit Jamal Williams somehow in the back of the end zone falling down. So like, there's definitely some great videos, and I could for sure talk about Aaron Rodgers all day. I could talk about Patrick Mahomes all day. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. I've been on that bandwagon since he got into the league. So it's not like I'm just rooting for him. And I think we're going to be blessed to see a lot of great quarterback play for years to come. But Tyler's not quite back yet, but we're going to go ahead and jump into week 3 waiver wire. George, you didn't update the rundown. It's week 5. We didn't go back 2 weeks.
It is, in fact, week 5. I got you. I updated the rundown everywhere except for there, and I got him. He got me last week, if you don't remember, on the buy high, sell low. So I got him back. I didn't even know he was going to be the one that was reading that, but it worked. If you guys remember, on the couchgms.com, I write a waiver wire column every single week. So I will go through the guys that are in my column. We can talk about them a little bit if you want to, especially because the waiver wire is starting to get thinner. We're going to have to probably, talk a little more about these guys on my column. So this week I've got Detroit quarterback Jared Goff, Tyler Algier for the Atlanta Falcons, who is now taking over Cordurelle Patterson. He was down in our others to talk about. I put him in the column this week. Brian Robinson for Washington, because he still has not been more added, and he has a chance to be a starting running back coming back next week. Like, he probably won't jump into 100% of carries right away, but that guy shouldn't be sitting on your waiver wire. Nyheim Hines, who we talked about with Jonathan Taylor being hurt, he could be a starter on Thursday. Raheem Mostert, who I think I might have jumped on in the waiver wire column 1 week early, but his ownership did bump a little bit. He now is getting the lead back carries in Miami. Romeo Doubs for Green Bay, who Cody can agree or disagree to. George Pickens, we talked about a little earlier with Pittsburgh, who got a bump when Kenny Pickett came in the game. And my streaming defense of the week is the Tennessee Titans. Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry I missed quotes of the week. By the way, I'll throw one more quote in there. RG3 said on Twitter that Antonio Brown showed more D today than the Seahawks and Lions did. So shout out to RG3. Making some very questionable tweets.
Cody obviously didn't see the reason why RG3 tweeted that. So we're not going to retweet that one on our Twitter, but we'll let you guys do some research to figure out why that one was said. Cody, you included.
Yeah, apparently I was not prepared. But we got to help our fans and our listeners get prepared this week. So let's talk about the waiver wire article. George, we've mentioned it. You wrote it. Not a lot of great options. Who would you say is the top option this week? Who you be spending the most fab dollars on if you're in a fab league? Who's your number one target?
Part of this is still my inability to believe Cordurelle Patterson can do it for a full season, plus the fact that he's hurt for at least 4 weeks. I think Tyler Algier is my top waiver guy this week because he, like he said, he's going to be a starting running back for 4 weeks. And then beyond that, I think if he plays well, he has a chance to carve a role for the long term. There's still the chance that Patterson takes it all back, but I still have a hard time believing it.
I think if you get Algier or if you get Brian Robinson, you're looking pretty solid. And I think George Pickens is another guy that, like, if you're looking for wide receiver more than running back, another solid guy. I think any of those three guys are good waiver pickups. I mean, I think Brian Robinson should have been owned this whole time, but it depends on how your leagues are set up. If you can put people on an IR spot, if you can't, fix it in the offseason with your commissioner. But really, I don't think you have a bad pick there. And the thing I'll mention about Algier real quick is this past week, Marcus Mariota threw an interception in the third quarter. After that interception in the third quarter, the Falcons said, we're done throwing the ball. They ran the ball 14 consecutive times after that. They flat out said, that's it, we're done, we're running it. And they ended up scoring a game-winning touchdown on the drive that they did 14 consecutive runs. So if they're starting to lose trust in Mariota and Ritter is not ready to go yet, then you're going to see more running. And if Patterson's not there, that means an uptick for Algier. I don't think it's a bad pick. Even if Patterson does come back, you might see Algier get more of the rushing downs and Patterson get more of the receiving downs. So I really don't think that's a bad pickup.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw out one name too, kind of goes with Tyler Algier. If you're in a fab league, you're going to go after Algier. But if you're already spent a lot of your fab money or you're a late waiver wire, a name to also consider is their other running back, Caleb Huntley. He was on the practice squad, but he was the corresponding move for Patterson to going on IR. He was called up, and he had the same amount of carries as Algier did against the Browns. They both had 10 carries on the day. Algier had an 8.4 yards per carry, which is actually fantastic, but Caleb Huntley still had 5.6, and he was the one that got the touchdown to conclude that 14 straight runs drive. So that is like a sneaky name. He's owned in less than 1% of leagues. So I think he's definitely worth an ad. See what happens with the split this week. And he might be a guy that you don't even have to spend any fab on while you let the rest of your league mates go out and bid over Tyler Algier.
Agreed. I did not include him on the article because I think Algier is going to end up being the guy with the more carries in the split, but it's definitely worth a speculative ad because we don't know. They're both rookies.
Speaking of rookies.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's enough for the waiver wire article. If you really want to hear more, you can always go into the couchgms.com, read our article. But there are some other guys that you can go target. Cody, you got any mentions?
Yeah, I was actually going to, real quick, I'm going to hit on some rookies, so I'm going to tie back into the article. George Pickens and Romeo Doubs, they're definitely worth adding this week. But one name to watch is Jamison Williams. He is now eligible to come off of PUP. He's probably already owned in your league if you have an IR spot, but if he's not, you might want to start thinking about, can you pick him up, can you not? Especially this week, because we're still this is the last week until bye week start. So you tend to have an extra roster spot or something like that. So maybe pick him up this week to try to get ahead of the curve. It'll be interesting. He was a high draft pick. We'll see how quick he gets acclimated back to playing. But Jamison Williams is a guy only owned in 10% of leagues. So he might not be ready for a few more weeks, but that window is now open for him to come off a PUP.
Yeah, and dead are the days of let's not pick up a Lion. Like, let's get real. Everybody was injured for the Lions. We were saying, don't start any Lions. They're going to suck because everyone's hurt. Like, their big playmakers were injured, everybody except for TJ Hawkinson, and they still put up 45 points in the game. The Lions are, I don't know if they're the highest scoring offense. I feel like they are, but they're at least up there. Are they?
So they're actually the highest scoring offense and the highest points allowed defense at the same time.
Which is heartbreaking if you're a Lions fan. As a fantasy fan, it makes Lions games so much more interesting because you can play anybody who goes against the Lions, but if it's going to be a shootout every game, you can play your Lions every week as well because they're going to be getting the points. So this is exciting stuff as fantasy fans. Like, these Lions players are becoming very interesting.
Agreed. And I've heard a lot of people going out there trying to chase fantasy points with Josh Reynolds, who was the receiver playing wide receiver 1 since Amon-Ra St. Brown was out. Jamison Williams isn't back yet. This offense is really good. But Josh Reynolds is not going to be the first target once those guys come back. You still have TJ Hawkinson. He'll probably be the third wide receiver, 4th target, maybe even 5th because DeAndre Swift didn't play either. Like, maybe add Josh Reynolds in case there's some guys out next week. There's still a chance Amon-Ra doesn't play, Jamison Williams doesn't play next week. Josh Reynolds, fantastic play. But don't go out there spending all your fab on him. Don't go out there trying to use your first waiver priority on him just because is a good chance that he ends up not even being fantasy relevant for even that 1 week.
Yeah. I'm going to just play devil's advocate for you. And he's definitely worth the ad because we don't know about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Mm-hmm. But Josh Reynolds has put up 11 plus points in 3 of the 4 weeks. So he's been doing it even when Amon-Ra was lighting it up. Now, do you expect the Lions to continue this high-powered offense? Will they eventually come back to earth? Then you might see a downtick. But especially now with the questionable marks around Amon-Ra and what he did even with Amon-Ra, I do think he is, at least a solid bench piece even once Amon-Ra comes out or comes back, not out.
Look, with Amon-Ra St. Brown not playing, with DeAndre Swift not playing, with Jamison Williams still on the IR to start the season, the Lions still went out there and put up big points with receivers that you don't expect. So if they're able to do that with receivers you don't expect, think about it. Swift is going to come back. Jamison Williams is coming back. Amon-Ra St. Brown will be back. All of this, tying back into the article, is big news for Jared Goff. Say what you will about him. I know I took some heat last year for saying I didn't think Goff was that much worse than Stafford and just saying Jared Goff MVP. But no, he's putting up points and he's doing it without his best receivers. So if his best receivers are coming back, he's just going to have an uptick. TJ Hawkinson is coming alive. And you got to think about, the Lions still do have the worst defense in the NFL. They're giving up the most points. If they're falling behind in games, they got to keep throwing it to stay in the game. They're not going to be able to just run. They can't. That's not them. They can't do it. So it means Jared Goff is going to get big points. I think that he is a solid fantasy quarterback to pick up, especially with a lot of quarterbacks being inconsistent or disappointing. But look at Jared Goff on the waiver wire.
Yeah, this is more Lions talk, like Cody said, than I ever expect us to have this season. Even though I expect them to make a jump, they are a fun team for fantasy, and one of those teams now you almost want to have a piece of, like a Bills offense and etc. But I know we've been literally skipping over this name on the rundown, but we have to talk about him. Mike Boone.
No.
So like we said, Javonte Williams is out for the season. We have Melvin Gordon fumbling issues. He's obviously also not going to be a bell cow back. He's going to be split somehow. Is Mike Boone at all worth an ad?
Yes. Melvin Gordon is limited this week. There is 100% chance Mike Boone is the starter this week. It's not the best matchup against the Colts, but Shaquille Barrett came back from injury and left the game with injury again. They're not the elite defense we were hoping for because they're just banged up. So I do think Mike Boone is startable. Like, he's going to be a guy that's also going to be up there with Algier, probably not as much as Algier. But I'm comparing him to a guy you did put in your article, Nyheim Hines or Mike Boone. They're both kind of like this week only, maybe potentially a little bit more down the line, just because they might try to relieve some of the, carry on Jonathan Taylor. And they both play on Thursday, which makes it very interesting. And with Melvin Gordon, banged up, I would give the nod to Mike Boone over Nyheim Hines for this week. But the actual fan question we got was Mike Boone or Tyler Algier. I'm going to say different all season long, but I would have to go with Algier for this one, just because I think you get longer term value, even though Mike Boone might be a better play this week in particular.
See, I don't know if it's just us having gone through these situations where like Mike Boone has burned us. The story that Tyler told us last week, for example, thinking that Mike Boone is going to kind of slide through to like a second round of waivers. There's still a chance he does, because he's technically not the starter. Melvin Gordon's still the name there. But I would definitely, if you're a Javonte Williams owner, go out there and try to get an Algier for this week, or for the long term, and then try to get Boone on your second round of waivers. That's kind of like then I'm going to go and snag the second guy in that offense in that split. Try to, handcuff yourself in a way. But if you're looking for a single week play, I actually disagree with Cody. I like Nyheim Hines better than Mike Boone, as long as Jonathan Taylor doesn't go, especially for the pass catching aspect, where I know Mike Boone is more of a pass catching back there too, but Nyheim Hines should get more work in the passing game than Mike Boone would.
Which I don't know if Jonathan Taylor will go or won't go. I have a feeling he will go, but
yeah, that's what
he does.
Buzz was. That's why I said Mike Boone over Nyheim Hines, because the buzz is Taylor will go this week.
But if Taylor's limited and they say he's probably going to be on a snap count, are you still starting Boone over Nyheim Hines?
I would still start Boone over Nyheim Hines if Gordon is out. Like I said, it could be a bigger play this week because Gordon is also hurt and he left the game. He was limited, and it's a neck injury, and those are always kind of crazy on which way they're going to go. So if Melvin Gordon's back, I wouldn't play Mike Boone at all. But if Melvin Gordon is not there and they're out Javonte Williams, I would think they would go with the guy Mike Boone, who's been in the system the whole offseason, and then they'll start looking at splits and other guys on the 10-day break.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Cody and I are saying the same thing. It's just I was thinking in the aspect of JT's not going to play, and he was thinking in the aspect of he was. That's all it is.
Correct.
And if you don't get Mike Boone, if you don't get Algier, Algier, however you want to pronounce it, whatever Cody's going to say, if you don't get one of those guys, you're in a deeper league and you're desperate to pick up a running back, one final guy I can say you can look at is Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, CEH is really implanting himself in that offense, but Pacheco definitely was utilized. He had 11 rushing attempts this week, which is great value. He had 63 yards, 5.7 yards per attempt against the number one rushing defense in the league. That's solid use. He's definitely getting looked at more in the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I'm not saying pick up Pacheco and put him in your lineup immediately. He's not that guy, but if CEH gets hurt, or if the Chiefs are able to get Pacheco in the lineup even more, he's going to get more value. So why not snag him before the value takes off? But again, this isn't somebody that you're dropping a big player to go get. It's not a huge target. It's just somebody you're getting if, you have an empty spot and you don't like the other guys, or you're in a deeper league. Those are the leagues you're going to look at this guy.
One other guy in that same exact situation as Tyler just said that I like from the same game, Rashad White. Is that what you're going to say, Cody?
No, I just think I was laughing because we have a rundown with all these players that we point out, and you guys keep adding, which is great. I love the spontaneity. Wow, can you guys?
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to say that word. That one's all you.
But I hit it. I nailed it. That's impressive for me. Almost as impressive how many guys were pulling from. But Rashad White, yeah, he did get a lot of work, and he got a lot of pass catching options that Leonard Fournette didn't. Now Leonard Fournette did get the touchdown at the end of the game. He finally got back in there. But Rashad White, a rookie, we're now a month into the season. He could be another guy like Pacheco. You're not adding to start. You're adding on potential. And those are the kind of guys that we've talked about before. not every league is different. Sometimes players lock and you can't drop them even if they're on your bench in some leagues. Sometimes if they're on your bench, you can drop them. Sometimes you can't pick up players after the 1:00 game on Sunday. But if you're in a league where it allows you to drop your bench players, the Buccaneers and the Chiefs, they're often playing at the second or the later window or night games or prime time because of their top teams. Maybe you want to pick up, maybe you pick up Mike Boone and he does absolutely nothing this week. You turn around and cut him for Rashad White and potentially get ahead for next week's waiver wires. So make sure you're working the waiver wires because that's where you win. That's how you make the biggest improvements on your team, and that's how you win a fantasy championship.
And our minds can just keep going with these guys because we're always, trying to make those moves like Cody was just talking about. We have to talk trades instead. So why don't we move on to a little buy low, sell high. Well, I'm going to start with the buy low category here, guys. Actually, I'm going to pass it off to Tyler to start it because it's something we've talked about a little bit in the last segment. So let's keep wrapping up with these Colts, Tyler.
Yeah, my buy low is Jonathan Taylor. Now, if you have a, expert, veteran, really intelligent manager out there who has Jonathan Taylor, we have a guy in our league of record who calls himself the fantasy godfather who has Jonathan Taylor. He's not going to give him up. I mean, you could try trading whatever you want. He's not going to give him up. But not every league has that. I was talking to somebody earlier this week that was like, you know what? That's it. I'm done with Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to try to trade him this week. And I was just wishing I was in that guy's league because Jonathan Taylor is a first overall pick. This is a guy that is, one of the best. Man, I feel like Chris Collinsworth. Here's a guy that, man, it's terrible. But here's a guy that was the number 1 overall pick. He's a solid running back. Last year, he dominated leagues. He won championships single-handedly for people. This isn't the kind of guy that you give up on. But he is really struggling to get anything going. I mean, he had 20 carries against the Titans and only had about 40 yards. He also is now banged up a little bit and questionable. I mean, he got benched at the end of the last game. Was it because of his play? Was it because of the injury? Who knows? But either way, this is a guy that people are getting frustrated with. You give a first overall pick for Jonathan Taylor, and he's not giving you any points. Like, suddenly you start offering him maybe a 3rd or 4th round guy that is performing above expectations. Maybe you're able to swing it, and then you're able to win later on down the year. It is also worth noting that, yes, Jonathan Taylor really struggled this week, but something I didn't know is in 4 starts against the Tennessee Titans in his career, Jonathan Taylor has never broken 100 yards. Not once. Titans have his number. He really struggles against the Titans. And this past game against the Titans was the worst game of his entire career in yards per attempt or yards per carry. So I don't expect that kind of thing to continue. He's going to bounce back from this. Go get Jonathan Taylor cheap while you can.
Yeah, and I just want to follow with Tyler said cheap, but don't think you're going to go ahead and be like, okay, I'm going to trade you Tyler Algier for Jonathan Taylor. Like that's not going to work. You're going to have to give up probably your top running back and maybe, one of these flyer wide receivers. Like you're going to have to give up some capital because he was the number 1 pick. But this is probably the lowest he'll be. Maybe next week if he doesn't play, you might be able to still consider him. But right now, be one of the lowest opportunities you can probably get Jonathan Taylor. So you might want to take advantage of. And that kind of plays into exactly with my guy too. Another, low end first round, middle tier, second round pick, running back, Alvin Kamara. Now you do still have always in the back of your mind, will something ever come of what happened at the Pro Bowl last year that might take him out the fantasy season? But look at Alvin Kamara. He hasn't played the last 2 weeks. And this week he was supposed to play. And in 85% of the leagues he was started. And he was a last minute inactive when inactives came out an hour and a half before the game, which would have been at 8 a.m. Eastern time. So a lot of people didn't wake up early enough or forgot that there was a 9:30 game and didn't change them. So they're going to have that burn. Like, I can't believe he was in my lineup. That's 85% of people that might be willing to trade Alvin Kamara. Again, you're probably going to have to give up something decent. Not as much to get Jonathan Taylor, but here's another guy you can expect once he gets back, he's going to be a part of that offense. He's going to put up points. He's probably not going to have a lower value than he does right now.
Exactly.
I am in 3 NFL.com fantasy leagues that Alvin Kamara was started. And in all 3 of those leagues, the team that started Kamara is projected to win. I find that absolutely insane.
That
just shows why fantasy is so
unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. That's absolutely insane. But I mean, especially also if you're in a PPR, you can go out there and get Alvin Kamara, someone who's involved in the pass game, really cheap. That's a great buy low candidate, and there's no time he's going to be cheaper than when he just frustrated a bunch of people playing in London. So I'm with that one. I have a buy low here to wrap us up on this part, and that's DJ Moore. A lot of people are super upset with DJ Moore right now, but you got to think they traded for Baker Mayfield really late in the process. Like, he's probably still learning the offense to an extent and doesn't have as much of a rapport with these wide receivers because he didn't get a chance to work with them through all the way through training camp. And I think that kind of shows with where DJ Moore is the perfect example of a guy who's getting a lot of looks and just not been able to turn it into anything yet. 6 targets in the first 3 weeks. He only caught 3 in one of them. So that hopefully is going to go up. Like, normally you see people, like, if they had 6 targets, they catch 4 or 5 balls. And then 3 and 1 is ridiculous. And then this past week, barely caught 50%, 11 targets, 6 catches. Much better with the 6 catches. But 11 targets, if you can get a guy with 11 targets on a buy low, I think you're doing really well. He's someone I'm starting to look at.
Yeah, and I think you can't rule out the rumblings that he might be a guy that's moved at the trade deadline. I know they did just give him a contract extension, but there has been some rumblings that he's not happy, the team's not happy, and one team that's linked to him is the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not saying it's going to happen come the trade deadline, but if it does and you can get DJ Moore, who would fit very nicely into that Chiefs offense, it's worth the ad. But like George said, he's already seen the uptick in targets. Now, he's never had a great catch percentage in his career. It's always been around 60%, but it's at 44% right now. So he got 15% worth of catches to come up on, and hopefully Baker Mayfield finally turns it around. So I do really like the DJ Moore ad as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's one of those go figure moments in sports. Like, go figure when the Dodgers got Freddie Freeman. Go figure when the Patriots got Stephon Gilmore. Go figure when you see the Bucks signed Julio Jones. Like, it's one of those go figure moments. It wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs go out and just get like a stud wide receiver, and just make him into who he's supposed to be when they're already doing really well. You're finally hoping that the Chiefs have a down year because they don't have any receivers, and then they're just crushing people. So, and then they get a guy like DJ Moore. It is possible. It would be a go figure moment. But either way, those are our buy low candidates. Those are the guys you're going to go out there and try to trade for because you're getting them below what their actual value is. But now we need to move on to our sell high. Who are the guys that you're trying to get rid of on your team? I'll go ahead and start us off. I got Jamal Williams, running back for the Detroit Lions. Now, this one's a strange one because it sounds like obviously you're going to try to sell Jamal Williams because he's a backup. But listen, even as a backup, he was killing it in the first 2 weeks. And even as a backup, he is currently ranked as running back 3 in fantasy. Running back 3 in half-point PPR leagues. Like, that's crazy. Now, you can find some teams out there that are really desperate for running backs. See the production he was putting up even with Swift there. See the production he's putting up now with Swift not there. And think, you know what? This guy's going to carve out a permanent role, kind of like a Tony Pollard or an A.J. Dillon or a Kareem Hunt. Like one of those guys where he's going to carve out a permanent role in the offense, even when the starter comes back. But the thing you got to keep in mind is Jamal Williams, a big reason why he had so much value in those first few weeks when Swift was there was the touchdowns. He had basically Swift would get him all the way down the field and Jamal Williams would score the touchdowns. I don't like rostering people. Well, not rostering people. I don't like starting people that are touchdown dependent. Unless you're in a league that touchdowns are way more valuable than yards, I don't like that. I don't want to have to bank on the fact that you're going to get a touchdown. So Jamal Williams is probably at the highest value he may ever be at. Maybe next week he will, raise his value a little bit more. But either way, see if you can find a guy who just lost Javonte Williams or a guy who just lost Cordurelle Patterson and is, really looking tight at that running back position, and see if you can get some good value out of a backup running back in Jamal Williams.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the touchdowns. He has 2 touchdowns in 3 of 4 games. That's already 6 on the season. That's why he's so high. I
There's
think
only
he will
one
have a
person I
role.
saw keep up that pace before, and it was James Conner last year. I don't see it happening again right away.
But James Conner was very similar to what Tyler is saying too, though. Like, they had Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds would do a lot of in between the 20s. In comes James Conner, fresh, gets him in the end zone. So I think he'll be relevant all season, but I 100% agree. He's not going to get much more valuable. And again, that's kind of where I'm at with my guy who's wide receiver, Hollywood Brown from the Arizona Cardinals. Now, he's off to a pretty good start. It's not a surprise. Like, it doesn't feel like a great start. I feel like there's a lot of fantasy players we are expecting more from. But in half-point PPR, he has scored just about 10 points or more in every week. The only week he didn't was at 9.8. So I'm going to give him credit for getting to 10, even though he didn't quite make it. And we're now 2 weeks away from DeAndre Hopkins returning. Now, he has a really good matchup this week, so you might even want to hang off as he does. No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the schedule wrong because it wasn't updated on my screen. This week is a terrible matchup. He played the Panthers last week. He has the Philadelphia Eagles this week. I know Darius Slay got hurt. I know Avonte Maddox got hurt, but they seem to have avoided long-term injury, and some of them might be able to be back there. And this Eagles defense is legit. So I would really hate to see, you not be able to take advantage of these 4 good weeks from Hollywood Brown. He has a really down week, and then all the hype about, Hollywood Brown had a down week. Don't worry, DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. So I think the value to trade Hollywood Brown is right now, but he's also not a guy that I'd go out and give away. Like, he'll have value all season long. So try to find an upgrade. Maybe he's a part of a 2-for-1 to get a star player. So I think he'll have value the rest of the season, but now is the time to trade him if you're going to do so.
I feel like he is the guy. If you've been listening to us since our mock drafts preseason, if you drafted him waiting for this exact moment. The moment where you're right before DeAndre Hopkins is going to come back. He just came off of a good game, and you're going to try to sell him because he's going to be talented the rest of the season, but not as high as he is now. So this is definitely the prime spot to trade Hollywood Brown before he potentially goes into a tough matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, who is where my sell high candidate comes from. And it's Miles Sanders. I like Miles Sanders a season long as well, but this is the only time in his career, I could even maybe say ever, and maybe in the future ever, that Miles Sanders is going to get 27 rushing attempts. Number one, if he keeps getting 27 rushing attempts, I don't see any way he gets through 4 weeks. That's just he's not built to be a running back that can shoulder that kind of load. Also, is he going to get 27 rushing attempts when he's averaging like 55% of the Eagles' offensive snaps? Like, he's going to be good the rest of the year. He could be an RB2 solid flex guy in your lineup pretty much every single week. But he's currently now running back 8 after that performance, putting up 28.6 last week. This is the absolute highest Miles Sanders value is going to be.
Yeah, I'm frustrated because I had Miles Sanders in quite a few leagues the last few years, and every year I'm like, all right, Miles Sanders, good value. He's got to be good this year, right? And they just don't use him. And then this year, I finally didn't go after Miles Sanders, and I played against him in pretty much every single league this week, and he just killed me. And the Eagles were like, hey, we're going to run the ball. Like, I hate you, Eagles. I hate you so much. And I always will. But yeah, no, Miles Sanders definitely a good sell high candidate because the Eagles are a crapshoot when it comes to trying to figure out who's going to get the points. They have so many mouths to feed. You got Devontae Smith with big weeks. You got, Kenny Gainwell is always in there getting some points. You got AJ Brown. You got Dallas Goedert. You got randomly Boston Scott will get something. You got randomly.
Kenny Gainwell got a touchdown this week.
Kenny Gainwell did get a touchdown this week. Trying to think of some of the other crapshoot people. Oh, Quez Watkins will randomly get a 70-yard touchdown out of nowhere. Like, they have so many mouths to feed. Jalen Hurts is going to run in half the touchdowns. So that takes away a lot of rushing touchdowns for Miles Sanders. It's the same as a running back on the Ravens. Like, it's a good offense. You want to have the running back, but when they get close to the goal line, instead of running it in with the running back, like most teams do, Lamar's just going to take it in. And it's the same with the Eagles. Like, you get close to the end zone, it's Jalen Hurts rushing it in. I have a first touchdown bet on Jalen Hurts almost every week, and it almost always hits. So it's definitely somebody you can try to trade for value. Like George said, he's not going to get 27 carries again. So trade him while he has his highest value. This might be your best time.
I agree. But that's some good trade candidates. If you have some other guys you want to move from your roster and need some help on what their value is, feel free to reach out. But before we go, let's do a quick TNF preview.
Thursday Night Football is going to take us to Denver, where the Indianapolis Colts will travel to the Denver Broncos. And as much as I see Tyler's reaction of, oh, great, Denver, it could even be worse because Russell Wilson did hurt his shoulder on Sunday and is listed as unofficially questionable going into Thursday Night Football. So a sputtering offense down Javonte Williams, potentially down Melvin Gordon, potentially down Russell Wilson. This could be one heck of an interesting game if you're anybody that owns a Denver Bronco.
Broncos country. Let's ride.
Yeah, I think this game in general is probably the most disappointing Thursday night game. I mean, we've had some pretty good ones. Maybe Pittsburgh, Cleveland, but that's rivalry. This one
that game ended up being pretty good. Not gonna lie.
That's what I'm saying. So maybe I'll be completely wrong. But yeah, and there's not I don't think this will be a week with a lot of fantasy impact. Obviously, if Jonathan Taylor goes, you're going to play him. Even if he's limited, there's not enough running backs that are as talented or can put up the points, even limited, that he can. If Melvin Gordon goes, you're probably going to play him, especially if you lost Javonte Williams. Russell Wilson is still scary. I know he kind of had a decent week this past week, but it didn't look great in the first half. And he finally got stuff going, but you mentioned the shoulder. So what are you doing with Russell Wilson? That's a tough one. And then you got the wide receivers for Denver. Do you like Sutton or Jerry Jeudy better? I'm going to say Sutton. George's going to say Sutton. Tyler probably say Jeudy just because he never agrees with us. Oh, he's on the Sutton.
Oh,
on the Sutton bandwagon.
Yep.
Shut it down. All right, I'm going Jeudy.
Time out. Actually, is Sutton still a guy if it's Brett ripping the ball out there?
I feel like, I mean, he has to be, right?
Yeah.
I think
if you
so,
have
but
Cortland Sutton putting up the kind of points he is this year, unless you were absolutely blessed with a really deep roster, I feel like you kind of have to run him out there. I feel like Brett Rippin and it's, I'm choosing between Garrett Wilson or Cortland Sutton, then I might be considering it, or, even like a Drake London. I might think about it, but I feel like you still got to roll Sutton.
Yeah, I think it's similar to like Brandon Cooks. He's on a bad team, but he is the number one guy. You never feel great about playing him, but he's just somehow still gets points. And if Brett Rippin's out there, that's how I feel about Cortland Sutton. But if Rippin's out there, I would not play Jerry Jeudy. I don't love Jerry Jeudy in this matchup anyways, but I'd feel better about it if Russell Wilson was there. And then there's really no tight ends to talk about because one of them catches a catch one week, the other one catches a catch the next week.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that. For the tight ends for the Colts, I mean, you had Jelani Woods out there putting up ridiculous points in week 3, and everybody rushed to the waiver wire for him. And then in week 4, you have Mo Alley Cox getting a ton of yards, ton of targets, and 2 touchdowns. Is there either of these tight ends that you feel comfortable with moving forward? Now, before you just flat out say no because they're inconsistent, you got to think the tight end position is weak. The tight end position is tough. And a lot of times we are looking at the tight end dartboard. And if you were somebody that threw the dart and hit Jelani Woods or Mo Alley Cox at the right time in week 2 or week 3 or 4, you probably won your matchup because they did that well compared to every other tight end. So you can't just completely discredit them, but they are sketchy because they're inconsistent. So either of these tight ends you like?
Not this week. Because Denver hasn't been able to move the ball on offense. We feel like they're a bad team because of that, but their defense has actually been solid. So I'm taking them off the dartboard for now. But you're not wrong. Both of them have some small space on the dartboard because of how they've been doing. So yeah, I see where you're going from.
All right, and I'm just going to share my super weird fantasy superstition, but I know all kinds of people have them. unless they're an elite tight end, I will not stream a tight end on Thursday Night Football because I would hate to be on Thursday have a 0 or a 2 or something like that. I just feel like it's a bad start to my week. So I don't like to stream tight ends on unless they're, elite guys or, this is the worst team against tight ends and he's like a mid-tier. For example, like if Dawson Knox was on Thursday and he was playing the Detroit Lions, okay, that one might be a worse streaming because we talk about how bad the Lions defense is and how good Dawson Knox can be. But weird superstition, I know, don't like to play quarterback or tight ends on Thursday Night Football.
And then Michael Pittman is the other guy worth talking about. Absolutely dominated in the first couple weeks, but missed a week, and then last week was completely shut down and borderline unusable. Are we still trusting him moving forward? I know we talked about how good the Broncos defense is. Do you still just throw Pittman in your lineup and forget about it, or do we have any fears here?
I'm still throwing Pittman out there. If I can still throw Cortland Sutton out there, I'm still throwing Michael Pittman out there. It was divisional, coming off of an injury. Obviously, it's a short week, but he's talented enough, and he is, again, the number one guy. So I'd roll him out there.
I'm with Cody.
On a rare occurrence.
Yeah. I think that's just about everybody worth mentioning in this matchup.
Alrighty. Well, I think that would be a good place to wrap up this episode. So as always, thanks for listening.
And of course, if you have any questions about who should you pick up on your waiver wire, maybe you have a trade and you're afraid to hit send or you're afraid to hit accept and you want us to look it over first, absolutely send it our way. We want to help. We want to help you win a fantasy championship, and we can't help you unless you come to us and give us those questions. Either way, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Yes, it is Tyler, and thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see y'all later this week.
Boom.